want you to imagine something for me. You're locked in a concrete tomb, 3 feet wide, 20 feet deep. No windows, no phone signal, and the person who trapped you is right outside, breaking into cars one by one. This isn't a horror story. This happened to me when I worked as a night security guard in a downtown condominium building. And the worst part? Management knew this trap existed. I told them someone could get locked in, but they did nothing about it. Tonight, I'm going to tell you exactly how someone used my building's own security system against me, how a simple door became my prison, and how the thief knew exactly where the cameras couldn't see. Because what happened that Wednesday night wasn't random. It was planned. And I was the target. The building where I worked was built in the late 1960s. Back then, architects didn't think much about security. They just wanted parking spaces, lots of them. So they built 2 levels of parking garage, both accessible from the street. No gates, no checkpoints, just open concrete ramps that anyone could walk up. Over the decades, the building went through renovation after renovation. They sealed off old hallways, added walls in strange places, created dead spaces that served no real purpose anymore. And that's how the trap was born. On the first floor of the garage, there was a door. It opened to a narrow corridor that ran directly under the ramp to the second level, about 3 feet wide and maybe 20 or 30 feet long. At the end was just a water pipe with a valve. That's all. But here's the thing. The door had a sliding bolt latch. You know the kind. A simple metal bar that slides across. Locks from the outside. No key needed. And there was no way to unlock it from the inside. None. I discovered this my first week on the job. I took a picture, showed it to management, told them someone could get trapped. They said they already knew. They had no plans to fix it. Every night, I had to check that hallway, make sure no one had wandered in and gotten locked inside by accident. But I never stepped foot in there myself. I was too cautious for that. Or so I thought. Because on a quiet Wednesday night at 3 a.m., someone proved that my fear wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. I was doing my second round of the night. Everything was normal. The cameras showed nothing suspicious. Just a slow Wednesday. The kind of shift where you start thinking about what you'll eat when you get home. Then I heard it. A door slamming. Loud. Echoing through the concrete garage. My heart dropped. I knew that sound. I'd heard that door slam before during my checks. It was heavy. Metal. It made a specific noise. I walked toward the sound, and there it was. The door to the dead-end hallway. Wide open. I looked around. No one. The garage appeared empty. I shouted, trying to scare off whoever might be hiding. No response. I thought maybe someone had been drinking in there. That happens sometimes. People looking for a private spot. A place the cameras couldn't see. And that's when I saw it. About 10 feet inside the hallway. An empty glass bottle. I sighed. Rolled my eyes. According to building policy, I had to pick up any trash I saw. No exceptions. I almost didn't do it. My gut was screaming at me. But my brain said no one would be stupid enough to lock me in. That would be insane. Why would anyone do that? I stepped inside, reached for the bottle, and the door slammed shut behind me. I ran back. 3 seconds, maybe 4. But the bolt was already locked. I started banging, screaming, but there was no one there, or at least no one who cared. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The walls were cinder block. The door was solid metal. and there were 6 stories of concrete and steel sitting right on top of me. I tried everything, different corners of the hallway, holding the phone up high. Nothing worked. I was trapped, completely, and whoever locked me in knew exactly what they were doing. Because here's what most people don't understand about parking garages. They're designed to block signals. The concrete is thick. The metal reinforcement is dense. It's basically a Faraday cage. And this hallway? It was in the worst possible spot. Underground. Under a ramp, surrounded by the thickest walls in the entire building. The person who did this didn't just get lucky. They knew my building. They knew where I would be. They knew about the bottle trick. And they knew I wouldn't be able to call for help. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. While I was trapped, car alarms started going off, one after another. I could hear them through the metal door. But here's the strange part. Each alarm only lasted a few minutes. Then silence. Then another alarm. Then silence again. I knew what was happening. Someone was breaking into cars, but they weren't just smashing and grabbing. They were professionals. Most people don't know this, but car alarms have a reset function. If you know what you're doing, you can trigger the alarm, then disable it completely. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes per car. And that's exactly what was happening. The thief wasn't panicking, wasn't rushing. They had all the time in the world, because the only person who could stop them was locked in a concrete box. I kept banging on the door every few minutes, hoping someone would hear. But it was 3 a.m. The building was asleep, and even if someone did hear something, they'd probably just think it was construction noise or someone moving furniture. I sat down, turned off my flashlight to save battery, and waited. 2 hours. That's how long I was in there. 2 full hours in complete darkness, in a space barely wider than my shoulders. I can tell you now that the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the helplessness. Knowing what was happening. Knowing I couldn't stop it. Knowing that my job was to prevent exactly this. Finally, around 5 a.m., someone came down to their car, an early commuter. I heard footsteps, started banging and screaming again. The person heard me, slide the bolt back, let me out. I thanked them, then immediately looked around the garage, and my heart sank. Broken glass everywhere. 12 cars, all with shattered windows, doors hanging open, glove compartments emptied, center consoles rifled through. The damage was in the tens of thousands. Electronics, cash, credit cards, registration documents, all gone. And the cameras? They caught nothing, because the dead-end hallway was in a blind spot. The thief knew exactly where to stand to lock the door without being seen. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. The police came, took my statement, reviewed footage, and found nothing useful. No face, no license plate, no identifying features. But I started thinking, how did the thief know about that hallway? How did they know about the bolt? How did they know the exact blind spot of the cameras? That information wasn't public. You couldn't find it online. You had to work in the building to know those details. Or you had to know someone who did. I remembered something. About 3 months earlier, another night guard had quit suddenly. No notice. Just stopped showing up. The building hired a replacement, but that replacement only lasted 2 weeks. Said the job was too boring, too much walking, too many stairs. But during those 2 weeks, that person would have learned everything. The camera positions, the blind spots, the weird architectural quirks, the hallway with the bolt. I brought this up to the police. They investigated, but the former employee had moved, changed phones, disappeared. They never found proof, but the timing was too perfect, the knowledge was too specific, and the execution was too clean. This wasn't some random criminal who got lucky. This was someone who had mapped out the entire operation, who knew exactly when I made my rounds, who knew exactly how to bait the trap with a bottle, who knew exactly which cars to hit and how to silence the alarms. My building's own security measures had been turned against it. The very thing that was supposed to keep people safe became the tool that made them vulnerable. But here's what I learned after I was fired. Something I wasn't supposed to know. That dead-end hallway, it wasn't supposed to have a bolt at all. The original plans from the 1960s showed a simple door with a push handle. No lock, no latch, nothing. Someone had added the bolt later, probably during one of the renovations. Maybe they were storing equipment in there temporarily. Maybe they were worried about trespassers. No one knows. But what that means is the trap wasn't part of the original design. It was created by accident, a security measure that became a security risk, and it was never inspected, never reviewed, never questioned. It just existed for decades until someone figured out how to weaponize it. I tried to warn them, tried to get them to remove the bolt or add an interior release, but bureaucracy is slow and cheap and resistant to change. So nothing happened until everything happened. After the incident, the building finally removed the bolt. They installed an interior push bar. They added cameras to cover the blind spots. They hired weekend security. All the things they should have done before. But it took a major theft and a fired employee for them to act. I never got my job back, never got an apology. The insurance company paid out the claims. The police closed the case as unsolved, and life went on. But I still think about that hallway, about those 2 hours in the dark, about the sound of car alarms going off while I banged on a door that no one could hear. I think about how easily it could have been worse. What if there had been no early commuter? What if I'd been stuck until the afternoon? What if something had happened to the building and emergency responders didn't know I was in there? A simple door, a simple bolt, a simple oversight. That's all it takes for everything to go wrong. I thought working nights at a gas station would be easy money. Just me, some snacks, and the occasional drunk customer stumbling in for cigarettes. But at exactly 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, everything changed. A man walked through those doors, and I knew instantly something was wrong. What happened next made me quit the next day. And honestly, I still look over my shoulder when I'm out in town. Let me tell you exactly what went down that night. Last summer, I decided to skip classes and make some cash. I was kind of burnt out on school, needed a break. I applied to this gas station right next to campus, and they hired me on the spot. Red flag number 1, but I ignored it. They said they only had night shifts available, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I figured, how bad could it be? Turns out, most nights weren't bad at all. The first few hours were busy. Then it'd die down around 2 or 3 a.m. I'd stock shelves, clean up, maybe watch some videos on my phone. Yeah, weird people came in sometimes, but nothing I couldn't handle. Or so I thought. This particular Thursday started normal. My coworker left at midnight, and I was alone. That's how it always worked. Time moved pretty fast, and before I knew it, it was almost 2 a.m. That's when I heard the door chime, and that's when everything went sideways. The guy who walked in, I got a bad vibe immediately. Shaved head, tattoos covering his arms, symbols I recognized from internet rabbit holes I probably shouldn't have gone down. I was pretty sure he was part of some hate group. He parked his beat-up lifted truck in the handicap spot, which already told me what kind of person he was. He didn't say anything at first, just wandered the aisles. Then he came up to me and started calling me slurs, said I looked too ethnic to be working there. I just stood there frozen, trying not to react. What was I supposed to do? Argue with this guy at 2 a.m. when I was completely alone? He grabbed a case of beer and brought it to the register. I looked at the clock. 2:01 a.m. My county has this law. No alcohol sales between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. I had to tell him. I tried to be polite about it. Sorry, sir, I can't sell this. It's past 2 a.m. That's when he lost it. Started yelling about freedom and how it's a stupid law. I explained I was just doing my job, but that made it worse. He started tearing into me, calling me spineless, saying I had no backbone. I told him he needed to leave if he was going to act like that. Then he switched, just like that. Suddenly, he was all friendly, saying it was no big deal. Come on, sweetheart. It was before 2 when I walked in. Just bend the rules for a couple minutes. And here's the thing. He kind of had a point. It was 1:58 when he came in, so I caved. I just wanted him gone. I sold him the beer. He asked for cigarettes too, and I gave him those. No law against that. He smiled at me and walked out. I actually felt relieved for a second, but that feeling lasted about 30 seconds because he didn't leave. Instead, he opened his tailgate, sat down, and cracked open a beer, right there in the parking lot. My stomach dropped. I knew this wasn't over. A few minutes later, another truck pulled up. 2 more guys got out. Same look, shaved heads, tattoos. They walked over to the first guy's truck and started drinking and smoking with him. They kept looking through the window at me, smirking, like they knew I wanted to go out there and tell them to leave, and they were daring me to try it. I knew I should. They were loitering, public drinking, all illegal, but I was scared. I'm not going to lie about that. There were 3 of them now, and they all looked like they were part of the same group. Then another vehicle showed up, an SUV this time. 2 more guys. Now there were 5 of them out there, drinking, laughing, throwing empty cans on the ground. My paranoid brain started going wild. The owner's wife is Mexican. Were they planning something? Were they going to trash the place? Burn it down? I know that sounds extreme, but when you're alone at 2 a.m., staring at a group like that, your mind goes to dark places. The first guy came back inside. He was drunker now, stumbling a little, still smiling. He grabbed another case of beer and brought it to the register. I opened my mouth to say no, but before I could get a word out, he leaned in close and said, "You really don't want to disappoint me and all my friends out there." That was a threat, a clear threat. My hands started shaking. I sold him the beer. He told me to keep the change, like he was doing me some huge favor, like he was tipping me for being a good girl. Then he walked back outside, and all his buddies cheered. They'd already finished the first 24-pack. Now, they had 24 more. I watched them through the window, tossing empties everywhere, kicking them around. I felt trapped. If I said no to them, I'd either get fired for letting this happen, or worse, they'd come after me. And who would stop by this gas station at 2:30 a.m. with a group like that hanging outside? Nobody. Nobody except more of them. I realized I had two choices. Let this continue and probably lose my job anyway when my boss saw the mess in the morning, or do something about it. I walked to the door and locked it. They couldn't come back in now. Then I went to the back office and called the police. My heart was pounding the entire time I waited. What if they figured out what I did? What if they came around to the back? What if they had weapons? About 10 minutes later, felt like an hour, a cop car pulled up. I heard shouting outside but couldn't make out the words. For a few minutes, I thought it might escalate into something worse. But eventually, they left. The cop stayed until they were completely gone, then came to check on me. I asked him to stay while I cleaned up all their empty cans, just in case they came back. I didn't sleep that day when I got home. I kept replaying everything in my head. The next day, I called my boss and quit. I couldn't do it. The thought of being behind that register again, alone, if those guys came back, that was more terrifying than being broke. But here's what really messes with me. I still see guys like that around town all the time. My town is full of them. And every time I do, I wonder, was that one of them? Do they recognize me? Are they angry I called the cops? I don't know what they're capable of. And that's what scares me most. Not knowing. That night taught me something important. Sometimes the money isn't worth it. Sometimes your gut is right, and you need to trust it. And sometimes the scariest thing isn't what actually happens. It's what could have happened if you'd made a different choice. Years ago, I worked as a barista at a locally owned coffee shop. It was the kind of place that hosted open mics and local musicians. Pretty cool during the day. But at night, that's a different story. Back before 2020, this place stayed open 24/7 from Thursday through Sunday. Most people hated working the graveyard shift. The tips were terrible because barely anyone came in. But that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was being alone. Being the only person in the only place open for miles. Sure, we were in a decent part of town. But here's the truth. There's no such thing as a good part of town at 3 a.m. My boss told me to never keep more than $50 in the register during overnight shifts. That should have told me everything I needed to know. I was always scared someone would drag me into the back room. So I came up with a solution. I asked my male friends to hang out with me during those shifts, keep me company, make me feel safer. One guy in particular would show up more than anyone else. His name was Nick. It usually worked out great. I made some money. I'd slip him some free drinks. We'd talk when it was slow. He'd work on his laptop when I was busy. We'd been friends for a while, but spending all those nights together made us closer. It was always platonic, though. Just friends. Nick knew a lot of my coworkers, too. We'd joke that he practically worked there himself. He'd laugh and say his photography career was more important. I never thought there'd be problems between us. And if there were, I figured it'd be because we made some drunken mistake. Not this. Never this. Summer of 2019. Saturday night. It was my last overnight shift of the weekend. I'd already worked Thursday and Friday without Nick because he went to a wedding for a family member. I got another friend to cover for those 2 nights. But Saturday, they bailed, said they were too tired. So I was alone. I was anxious about it. But I figured I could manage one night, and honestly, it was surprisingly slow. By 3 a.m., I'd only made $10 in tips, but I was grateful. No crazy people, no problems. That's when things changed. The shop was completely empty except for me. I was putting a batch of coffee into the roaster when I saw something move past the front window. Just a figure. A shadow. I looked up. Nobody there. I waited for someone to come around to the back door. Customers could use that entrance too. But a full minute passed. Nobody came in. I hung around the register for a few more minutes. Still nothing. So I decided to mop the floors. I went to the back to fill up the bucket. And of course, as soon as I turned the faucet on, I heard the front door open. I shouted that I'd be with them in just a minute, finished filling the bucket, rolled it out front. Whoever came in had disappeared. I figured they went to the bathroom, so I started mopping behind the counter. But something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, just a feeling in my gut. I checked the register first. Hadn't been touched. That would have been loud anyway over the running water. Then I looked at the bathroom doors. The men's room door was closed. Light was on. Someone was definitely in there. My stomach twisted slightly. A man, alone in there. But I had no real reason to think anything was wrong yet, so I kept mopping. When I finally finished behind the counter, the bathroom door opened and Nick walked out. I felt relief wash over me immediately. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He said he just got home from the wedding. Thought he'd stop by and say hi. I was so grateful he showed up. I told him he could have whatever he wanted on the house. So I got behind the espresso machine and started making his drink. I packed the grounds into the portafilter, locked it into the machine. Then I looked over to say something to him, but whatever I was going to say disappeared from my mind. His face had changed, completely changed. In just that one moment of me looking away, his friendly expression was gone. Now it was something else, something dark. A wave of chills went through my entire body. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice was trembling. Nick grinned. It wasn't a friendly grin. It was psychotic, and then he pulled a knife out from behind his back. "I'm finally going to bang the barista," he said, and then he started laughing. My mind went blank for a second. This couldn't be real. This was Nick, my friend, the guy who'd spent dozens of nights keeping me company. "Don't be crazy," I shouted. I was fighting back the trembling now. "We're friends. What about the cameras?" Nick started walking forward. I backed up. My legs felt weak. "We are friends," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, and nobody will believe you, because the cameras aren't even on. They never are. How do you not know that? My heart dropped. The cameras were fake. How did he know that? How long had he known? I realized in that moment that he was pushing me toward the back of the shop, away from the windows, away from where anyone could see. My throat started closing up. I couldn't breathe right. "Your boss already thinks we do every night," Nick said. He kept inching closer. "Stop it," I shouted. I was desperate now, looking for anything to defend myself, trying not to slip on the wet floor I'd just mopped. "Shut up," he screamed back. The sudden volume made me jump. "You should have been giving this to me for months already. Do you know how much time I wasted on you?" Time he wasted. That's what I was to him. A waste of time because I wasn't giving him what he wanted. All those nights, all those conversations, all that trust. It was all just him waiting, planning. I was pleading now, begging him to stop. I was about to be cornered in the back where nobody could see. My last hope was something on the sandwich counter. In the last possible moment before he pushed me completely out of sight, I grabbed for the panini press. I ripped it off the table, swung it at his head, aimed for the side. He tried to block me with the knife. The blade sliced open my arm. I felt the sharp pain immediately, but I connected the hit anyway. The corner of the metal panini press slammed against the side of his head. Combined with the water on the floor, the blow knocked him off his feet. He went down hard. I didn't waste a single second. I climbed over the counter, ran for the back door, got to my car, locked myself inside. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, but I managed to call the police. That's when I realized something else. Something that made my stomach drop even further. Nick had parked his car directly in front of mine, blocking me in. He'd done it deliberately. He'd planned that too. I was trapped in my car, bleeding, on the phone with the 911 operator, and that's when Nick came outside. He looked furious, blood on the side of his head from where I hit him. He walked straight to my car and started trying to break in. I was screaming into the phone, telling the operator what was happening. He was pulling on the door handles, pounding on the windows, trying everything. But my car doors held. After several minutes of this, he gave up, got in his car, and drove off. This was right before the police arrived. When they got there, I was treated for the cut on my arm. It wasn't deep enough to need stitches, but it was bleeding pretty badly. I gave my statement about everything that happened. I didn't leave out a single detail. I was too much in shock to even feel disbelief. It all felt surreal, like it happened to someone else. The police told me something that confirmed what Nick had said. The cameras inside the shop were just for show. They weren't recording anything. Never had been. But nobody thought I was lying. The cut on my arm was real. His behavior after I called the police was real. Everything pointed to him. Unfortunately, because of civil liability issues with my employer, and because Nick completely disappeared after posting bail, I decided to drop the charges. He'd already ruined his own life. I didn't have the energy to pursue it further. I just wanted it to be over. Nobody has seen or heard from Nick in years. He vanished completely. The coffee shop has since stopped staying open overnight. I don't know if what happened to me was the reason, but I'd like to think it played a part. People assume I quit because of the attack, but I didn't. I actually kept working there. I stayed for years after. I only quit a few months ago for completely unrelated reasons. Why did I stay? I don't know. Maybe I didn't want him to take that away from me too. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't going to let fear control my life. Or maybe I just needed the money. There's one more thing I haven't told you yet. Something I found out later that made the whole thing even worse. After Nick disappeared, I talked to some of our mutual friends, trying to make sense of what happened, trying to understand if there were warning signs I missed. One of them told me something that made my blood run cold. Nick had done this before, not the exact same thing, but he'd made unwanted advances toward another woman in our friend group years earlier. She'd shut him down immediately and cut him off, but she never reported it, never told most people about it. She thought it was just a one-time thing, a drunken mistake. She didn't want to cause drama in the friend group. If I had known that, I never would have asked him to spend those nights with me at the coffee shop. I never would have trusted him, but I didn't know, because she didn't tell anyone, and I understand why. I really do. It's hard to speak up about these things. You worry people won't believe you. You worry about causing problems. But silence protects predators. It gives them the opportunity to do it again, to someone else. I'm not blaming her. Not at all. I'm just saying we need to do better as a society about believing women when they speak up, about taking these things seriously before they escalate. That night changed how I see the world. It changed how I see friendship. It made me more cautious. Maybe too cautious. But I'm okay with that. Before I moved out of my hometown, I worked as a waitress at a Waffle House. I chose the third shift because it had the best hourly pay and brought in pretty good tips. We were the only 24/7 diner in the entire town. It took me about a year to save up enough money to rent a place in the city and get out of the middle of nowhere. But in that time, I saw quite a few things that still stick with me to this day. Most of my customers were truckers and random people traveling on the interstate through the middle of the night. Our town wasn't a destination. It was just a stopover point. The locals consisted of farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area, and people like me who worked in the fast food and hotel chains clustered around the interstate exit. But there was another group, the most characteristic residents of that depressing town. Vagrants, hitchhikers, tweakers, destitute people who'd been stranded with us. They could be stuck there anywhere from a few days to several years. They clung to parking lots and awnings, the only meager shelter for dozens of miles in any direction, panhandling for whatever they could, until they got lucky enough to get a ride somewhere else. The only stressful part of my job was dealing with these people. In the beginning, I tried to be empathetic. After all, they're human. But it didn't take long to end up like my coworker. The cook had been there for 15 years. His name was Carl. He'd seen just about everything. The only thing separating him from the vagrants was a steady position at the grill. Carl was prone to throwing spatulas and other utensils at anyone who got on his bad side. I usually followed his lead based on his body language. He knew who was trouble and who wasn't. But even with Carl as backup, things sometimes got out of hand. There was this one night I'll never forget. I don't remember what day of the week it was. All I know is it had been unusually slow. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning when this man walked in. Even I knew something was not right about him. He was wearing soiled clothes and a completely torn up jacket, covered head to toe in dust. And he was in a completely panicked state of mind. The weird thing was, he said nothing. He just ran past us, clutching his right arm to his chest, then immediately locked himself in the bathroom. Carl and I rolled our eyes at the same time. Here we go again, we thought. Although I think we both had a feeling this wasn't a regular bathroom emergency, or a tweaker looking for a private place to get high. That's when I asked Carl, "Doesn't he kind of look familiar?" He brushed it off at first, but then, after a short conversation, we realized something. He had been inside about 2 hours ago, desperately asking all the customers for rides. Eventually, we had to kick him out for being a disturbance, so he obviously hadn't had any luck getting a ride. But something else had happened to him too. I became worried. If that guy needed help, it would be a while before an ambulance could get to him, and even longer for them to take him to a hospital. Carl told me to take care of it. So I ran the check for the only customer we had in the store at the time and got them on their way. Then I grabbed the bathroom keys and went to check on our stranger in distress. I knocked on the door pretty loud. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause. Then finally, a distraught voice answered me. "I think I'm really hurt. I just need a ride." Suddenly, I knew something was seriously wrong. The sound of his voice made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I fumbled with the key ring as I told him I was about to open the door. "Sir, if you need help, I have to come in there." "No!" the stranger screamed. "You have to come get me." I stopped for a second, confused, but then I snapped out of it, shoved the key in the lock and turned it, then opened the door. The bathroom was empty, completely empty. No injured man, no blood, no dust, just nothing. It was as clean as it had been since I last cleaned it. In fact, it even looked cleaner than that. Carl shouted from the kitchen, "What's going on in there?" I was just at a loss. I let the bathroom door close and stepped back. I looked at Carl and told him the truth. "There's nobody in there." "Don't give me that," Carl shouted. "See for yourself," I told him. And he did. He stormed over and barged through the bathroom door. I saw him go blank, just like I did when he saw the impossible absence of a person. He turned around and looked inside the women's room too. Again, nothing. In raw disbelief, we gathered ourselves behind the counter. We interrogated each other uselessly, thinking one of us must have let him slip by unnoticed. But we both knew we'd been on high alert since the second he came in. There was no way neither of us would have noticed him leaving. Our conversation ended as we both saw the same thing out of the corner of our eyes. The stranger was somehow outside, looking at us through the window. He still had his right arm stuffed out of sight. But now, as we got more of an eyeful of his face than we ever wanted, we saw that wasn't his only problem. His face was bloody, like he'd been hit with a brick. His nose was broken. His lip was split and missing a piece, showing us his cracked and missing teeth. One of his eyes seemed completely swollen shut, but the one that was open was gushing blood. Carl and I didn't move a muscle. We didn't even breathe for a second. After a few horrible seconds of realizing what was happening, I finally thought to call 911. But as soon as the idea occurred to me, the man started to move. He turned to the side and started to limp across the big front window. We watched him in silence. He made it all the way to the corner of the window, where it wrapped around to the other side. "What the hell?" I whispered. Carl quickly shushed me. It was at that moment I saw he had gone pale and wide-eyed, which only terrified me even more. Something about this man had gotten through Carl's defenses, and that meant we were not prepared. Before we could say anything else, we heard a crash from the back room. We both ran inside and searched for the source of the noise. It was coming from the walk-in freezer. Somebody was tearing things up and freaking out. Carl ran up and threw open the door. There he was, that man. He had ripped open a box of burger patties and was clutching a handful of meat, pressing it to his right arm like an ice pack. When he saw us, he froze. The patties dropped from his hand and revealed the condition of his arm. His hand was stuck in a thumbs-up position, but his wrist had been snapped clean off. His hand was dangling from the rest of his arm by a thread of skin. After a terrifying moment of staring at each other, the stranger bolted from the freezer, crashing through both me and Carl. He sprinted outside, screaming before we had a chance to react. I stumbled to my feet as Carl ran out to the dining area. He locked the front doors and switched off all the lights. Then he pushed me back into the back room. "How could you leave the back door unlocked?" he yelled. "No, look. It's still locked." I pointed to the back door. Sure enough, it was locked. It had been locked the entire time. Absolutely nothing was making sense. But we gave up on trying to decipher it. For the rest of the night, until the sun came up and the morning crew came in, we kept the doors locked and stayed out of sight. When we were finally freed from our nightmare of a shift and stepped out into the world, we noticed the train of police and paramedics on the freeway, right outside of town. We asked around only to find out that a man had been killed in a hit and run, right there at the off-ramp, not even 1,000 feet from the Waffle House. He died sometime after midnight, but his body lay on the shoulder undiscovered until daylight. His corpse was mangled, but his thumb was still sticking straight up from trying to hitch a ride. By the afternoon, they had scraped him off the pavement and washed away his blood, until the spot where he died was cleaner than I'd ever seen it. Just like that bathroom. Just like the freezer floor where the burger patties should have been scattered. Clean, like nothing had ever happened there. The description matched. Everything matched. The torn jacket, the dust, the injuries, the thumb. We had served a dead man. Or rather, we'd been visited by one. I don't know if it was his spirit trying to finish what he'd started before he died, trying to get that ride he'd been desperately asking for, or if it was something else entirely. I quit 2 weeks later. I couldn't do it anymore. Every time someone walked in during those late hours, I'd freeze, waiting to see if they were real or not. Carl stayed. Of course he did. He'd been there 15 years. What was one more ghost to him? But we never talked about what happened that night. Not with each other. Not with anyone else. Who would believe us? A man walks into a bathroom and disappears, then appears outside, then appears in a locked freezer, and hours later, we find out he'd been dead the whole time. It sounds insane. It sounds like we made it up, or like we were on something. But we weren't. We both saw it. We both experienced it. And that's what made it so terrifying. Because if it happened once, it could happen again. I think about that man a lot. About how he died alone on that off-ramp in the dark. About how he spent his last moments with his thumb up, hoping someone would stop. Nobody did. Not until it was too late. And somehow, even after death, he was still trying. Still asking for help. Still looking for a ride to somewhere else. There's one more thing I never told anyone, not even Carl. A few weeks after that night, I was driving out of town for the last time, moving to the city, starting over. I passed that off-ramp, the spot where they found him, and I swear I saw someone standing there, thumb up, waiting for a ride. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I just kept driving. Eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel. But in my rearview mirror, I saw him turn and watch my car disappear down the highway. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just guilt. Maybe it was someone else entirely. Or maybe he's still there, still trying to get that ride, still stuck in that moment between life and death, between asking for help and being left behind. I don't work graveyard shifts anymore. I don't work at diners. I don't drive through small towns in the middle of the night. And I never, ever pick up hitchhikers. I've been a night owl my whole life, so I work night shifts exclusively. I really don't work well with other people, whether they're coworkers or not. So I picked a job I could do completely on my own and became a nighttime janitor for my local school district. Schools have always had nightly cleaning as part of health codes. But obviously, in recent years, it's become much more important. My first job was at a fairly large K through 12 school. There were a couple of daytime custodians as well, but at night it was just me and one other person. We split the school down the middle. My coworker and I barely ever interacted, which I appreciated a lot. Every single night, all the floors get mopped or vacuumed. Every desk, table, and door handle gets disinfected. Every toilet, urinal, and sink gets cleaned. It takes a full 8-hour shift to accomplish, and for that entire time, I don't talk to a single person. It's great, honestly. When I tell people about my job, a lot of them think the hardest part is having to clean up after the messes left by students. And for the most part, I guess they're right. But I always tell them I would rather plunge and clean 10 clogged toilets every single night than ever have to work directly with another human being all day long, especially a horde of minors. There's one example I give of why I say that. It was the night after Halloween. I came in for my usual 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. shift and got started without even saying hello to my coworker. We started on opposite ends and met in the middle, so we would only see each other when we were finishing up. The first hour was mostly normal, except for one obvious thing out of the ordinary. I always keep my music at a low volume on my headphones, but from outside them, I kept hearing things. Usually, all the other faculty are gone by 8 p.m., but sometimes there's somebody who stays late. I couldn't decide what I was hearing through my music, but I wasn't in the mood to turn it off, so I just ignored it. A little while later, I took a break from mopping to change the water in the bucket. I was gone for about 5 minutes, but on my way back to where I stopped, I walked past one of the hallways I had just mopped. The wet floor sign had fallen over. For legal reasons, I had to step over the wet floor and stand it back up, then mop back over my tracks on the way out. Annoyed, I walked over to it, but I froze for a moment when something else caught my eye. There was another set of tracks in the water, leading to and from the sign. They were little footprints, something a kid would make. After I stood the sign back up, I followed the tracks, knowing I would have to mop over those too, basically redoing the whole hallway. The tracks ran all the way to the end, where there was a flight of stairs to the second floor. From there, they dried up pretty quickly. I stormed up the stairs and got to the second floor, but nobody was there. I took my phone out of my pocket and paused my music, so if anyone was running around, I would be able to hear them. Right as I looked down, I saw a flash of movement at the end of the hallway. I also heard a bunch of footsteps echoing across the empty school, so I started making my way to the end of the hall. By the time I got there, I still couldn't see anyone. But then I heard it, a little kid laughing. It felt like I was in a horror movie. But at that point, I was more annoyed than scared. I stood there looking around for a few seconds, until I heard a crash from the first floor. I rushed downstairs and nearly lost it when I saw the mop bucket I had just refilled was knocked over. The water was spilling everywhere in a huge pool. I absolutely swore my head off as I went back to the nearest janitor's closet for a dry mop and a bunch of towels. It took me half an hour to clean up that mess, and then another 15 minutes to redo the hallway that got messed up, which meant my lunch break was down to 15 minutes. I was so pissed off that I walked to the other side of the school and interrupted my coworker to ask if she had been messing with me. She looked completely dumbfounded and innocent. She asked if I was all right or needed any help. But to that, I just walked away. I set up again and got back to work. Another hour passed, and I managed to make up some lost progress. I was angrily powering through it, debating in my head the whole time about what I should do. I thought about reporting it to the school, or maybe just calling the police myself. But in the end, I figured I would seem crazy to everyone, just like I did to my coworker. Nothing happened again until 11 p.m. Out of nowhere, the lights shut off in the whole school. It was pitch black for about 3 seconds, until the dim emergency lights turned on. Then everything had a reddish hue to it. It came as a shock to me, and to be honest, I was worried. I tried to tell myself it was a malfunction, or maybe some kids messing around. But my mind was going to all sorts of possibilities. I had keys to the electrical room where the light switches were, and I was the closest to it. So I stopped what I was doing and marched over. I was pissed off about losing more time and missing out on my entire lunch break. But halfway there, something pushed those concerns out of my head. I heard the most blood-curdling scream of my life, the panicked shriek of my coworker echoing endlessly. I stopped in my tracks, feeling like I had just been hit by an electric shock. Seconds later, I heard the sound of a door opening really loudly, like someone was ramming through it from the inside. I hoped it was my coworker escaping, and not somebody else making their way into the school. I forced myself to keep going, and finally made it to the electrical room. I was right outside the door, trying to find the right key, when I noticed that it was already cracked open. I pushed it open slowly, afraid of what I might see, and a shape appeared in front of me, standing unnaturally in the darkness. My blood ran cold. It could have been anyone. I gave up on trying to turn on the lights and instead reached for my phone in my pocket. But as soon as I moved, the figure bolted forward and slammed the door in my face. I cursed and then jumped back, stumbling until my back hit the wall behind me. Once I regained my balance, I started running. I wanted to leave. But for once in my life, I thought about the well-being of somebody else and ran to the other side of the school to find my coworker. After checking a few of her hallways, I finally found her mop bucket sitting alone in the middle of the floor, next to a bathroom. Without hesitation, I rushed over to it, hoping to not see any evidence that she had been hurt. Nothing seemed unusual except for the fact that she was nowhere to be found. I looked all around in the dim lighting, but as far as I could tell, I was alone, but not completely alone. The sound of a laughing child echoed in the distance again, striking fear into my chest. I clutched the handle of the mop for lack of anything else to defend myself with. I lifted it out of the bucket, holding the end of the handle out like a spear. I faced the direction of the laughter. Looking down the hallway so intently, I got tunnel vision. In a moment of sheer terror, someone whispered, "Hello," into my ear. I turned around, and without thinking, I jabbed the handle of the mop into their chest with all my might. I heard a grunt as the person that snuck up on me hit the ground, and they vomited only a second later. I shouted at them to tell me who they were. But then, they started to cry. I could tell they were trying to hold it back, but they couldn't. Gradually, my eyes made out what I was looking at. It was a student, kneeled over on the floor. Suddenly, all my fear of danger was replaced with the fear of losing my job for hitting a student. However, as things shook out over the next few days, it turned out all right. 2 twins in the 9th grade and their little brother got the idea to keep the spirit of Halloween going. They pranked the overnight janitors by hiding in the lockers. There was 1 set of lockers in the whole building that wasn't in use. No locks or ties on them, and those kids were skinny enough to fit in there and hide after doing their after-school activities. They managed to get out of being expelled, probably from crying a lot. The school district understood my actions and let me keep my job, but I was transferred to a different school. All in all, this is why I don't like people, especially kids. There's one more thing I didn't mention, something that still bothers me to this day. When the school reviewed the security footage to confirm what happened, they found something strange. The cameras showed the kids entering the school through a side door that should have been locked. One of them had a key. They never figured out where they got it. The kids claimed they found it on the ground outside, but that didn't make sense. Those keys are controlled, tracked. You can't just lose one without it being reported. Someone gave them that key, or they stole it from someone. Either way, it means there was a security breach nobody wanted to talk about. The school quietly changed all the locks after that, but they never told anyone why. They just said it was routine maintenance. I think about that sometimes, about how easy it was for those kids to get in, about how nobody knew they were there until I found them. And I wonder how many other times someone's been in that school at night without anyone knowing.